Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you all doing today? Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good morning. Make sure I'm actually live and everyone can see. Yep, there we go. Okay, good morning. What drink do I have today? The one bad, I drink these from Dutch Bros in support of our Dutch contingent. I'm very pro-Dutch, as we know. It's basically an energy drink. It's a bad habit. It is a bad habit. Good day, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Something new on Ugarte? Not exactly, but I want to discuss the overall picture of things. So, yes, how is everybody doing? How are you all? Hello from Reading, England. I said that right? Nailed it. Let's go. No, it's like an energy drink, basically. It's just like an energy drink. It's what it is. It's a, I don't know what the comparable would be, but an energy drink of some sort. Fofana, Zubimendi, Ugarte. Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about. I want to look at the different profiles because these midfielders, these names are all very, very different. All very, very different. I am from Colorado. Well, I live in Colorado. I'm not from here. I'm from everywhere. Good morning. The Faroe Islands, nice. That's cool. Yeah, South Park is here. Kosovo, wow. South Africa, that's right. That's South Africa. That's where my dad is from. My spelling of my spelling and my pronunciation is all wrong on Mazroui. Johannesburg, Kenya, UK, Poland, Canada, Ireland, Korea, Portugal, Trinidad, Manchester. Let's go. Fantastic. England, Midlands, very exotic. He moved to the States in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. My dad is kind of quite old, actually. Galway, Jamaica, Morocco, Aussie, Norfolk, Mazroui, Kenya, Saudi, Bombay, Singapore. Amazing. UAE, everybody from all over the place. Sunny Scotland, Ethiopia. Incredible. I mean, that's incredible. Marseille. I think Marseille is right. Bulgaria, Saturn. Okay. That might be the furthest away. Chicago. That's where I'm from, actually, originally. Chicago. London, Swansea. Kenya, Mars. Okay. Well, Saturn's got you beat. Sweden, Blackburn, Pakistan, Fiji. I love it. We got nearly every country on Earth here. I said it right. I did. Leicester, Jamaica, Morocco, Ireland. Yeah, my dad left South Africa because of apartheid a long time ago, so he didn't want to go back for a long, long time. A lot of things he did not want to go back to there, for sure. So that has been something that shaped certain aspects of life. Okay, well, thank you all for introducing where you're from. Important part of the getting to know you all. I appreciate it. I really do. I have a lot. I've got like a giant list of things I need to and want to discuss. So I want to say again, thank you to everybody for being here before we get going. The microphone should be better. It should be better. I increased the sound on it, and from the last videos that I did, it should be better. Yeah, I noted, wait, hold on. How about now? Tell me now that the sound is better. Is the sound louder? The sound is good? I just turned it up. Now tell me if it's any louder. Because I think it's louder. People were telling me beforehand that sometimes obviously like when the ads would kick in, then the ads were a lot louder, so the volume would be messed up. So, yes, I think that I've turned it up now. I think I've turned it up now, and it should be better. And now you'll probably get ads, so you'll see if it's how it goes. So there you go. Cool. That's better. Okay, louder and clearer. I know for a lot of people they said it's fine. For some people they said it wasn't great. So yes, I do have some things that I haven't seen reported that I want to discuss today. I do have some things that I haven't seen reported right now that I want to discuss today, for sure. Some new things that I want to discuss. So there's a lot to get into. So I better stop stalling. Thank you to all the members, people like that. Remember, once we get going, I try not to read all of the messages once we start, and I'll read from people who are donating and members and all that, just so I actually get through what I want to get through first and foremost. Let's start on the midfield. So on the midfield, actually, yes, okay, let's start on the midfield. God, I have so many things to get through. On the midfield, they're definitely looking now at obviously making a midfield signing, and have definitely recognized that they need to. The question is, of course, what kind of midfielder fits, how they want to play, as well as what they can afford, and this is going to kind of teach or dictate who they can sign in the market. Because as of now, there's been a bit of a, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze in a second. There's been a bit of a change in the way that United's midfield are setting up compared to beforehand. And I want to show this because then we can look at potentially, what is the right player. Excuse me. God damn. Allergies. Potentially, what is the right player for United moving forward? So, oh, son of a bitch. One of the things that, thank you. One of the things that changed here, let me go to this, is that, in Rangers and in the first preseason games, one of the differences we saw from the midfield is that they were playing in a pivot. If we look at Casemiro and Collier especially in here, we can see that they're kind of flat in where they are playing. There's not, Casemiro was a little bit more on the right, but there wasn't this one deep midfielder and two players up. And, yeah, and so it's different to what we're looking at last year. So what I think they don't want, and because I think there's really not this player available in the market, is they don't need that unicorn single pivot type of player. They're going to want them to play together. And in the first game, when Mason Mount was playing deeper, he was also playing next to Casemiro, kind of in a two. And so if we consider that one of these guys is going to be Kobbie Mainoo, and this will be Bruno Fernandes playing in a, obviously kind of an all-over attacking 10 role, then who makes the most sense for United's midfield, right? Is it true Getafe have a 20% fee on Mason Greenwood deal? It seems like it. I mean, it's well reported. I don't know. There was an article from the Telegraph and others talking about it. But we will almost certainly be playing in a double pivot. So I'm not saying we don't want a destroyer 6. I'm saying we want we don't. I guess the question becomes, how do you balance it? What do you want? And midfield dynamics are obviously very complicated. Early on in the season, early on before the transfer window, was pretty obvious when we were talking about the center backs and we were talking about the forwards, that what we wanted, what we were looking for. We were looking for pretty clearly a striker that would drop in. And we've talked about this a lot. We'll go over it in just a minute here. You drop in a striker who can kind of drop in. And you wanted a center back who can cover and partner Lisandro Martinez. Midfield dynamics are complicated. When we go to kind of like how we were playing and we look at the current team right now, and we're going to come back to this graphic later. You know, last year we would have been playing something like this, right? And we ended up with, that's how we ended up with this big old donut. Because we had these like big gaps in the midfield, right? And it was very imbalanced, you know. It was very open. And so obviously Casemiro, even with his legs going, was exposed even further as a player. This year, if we look at how we're setting up in the first couple of preseason games, it's probably more like this, which is a very Ten Hag way of playing, by the way. His kind of box midfield setup here is a bit more. This is fairly a Ten Hag way. You have your striker kind of dropping in and your 10 going beyond him. So your 2 10s are your striker and your 10 rather than your 2 midfielders. And yeah. And this is better. This is more compact. We saw it in the last match. If you look at, like, if we move away from the midfielders and we look at, like, Wheatley was dropping around all over, right? There was a lot of compactness. Ahmad deep staying, but he stayed, on his wing. Excuse me. Jadon Sancho stayed on his wing. And it's real interesting. So it's definitely more balanced, right? It's definitely more balanced to play this way. But it also means who's the best player here? What do you need here? What are you prioritizing, right? You could prioritize different things and look at it in different ways, and that'll give you different players. And I think that I don't know the exact answer here in terms of who fits. And I'm not sure that anybody is totally certain yet. But if we look at like Ugarte versus, Fofana, for example, what do you think, like, you want out of your midfielder? Because they are very different. Ugarte is constantly in the highest brackets for defensive actions, tackles, interceptions, high pass percentage, recoveries in the opposition half. He's going to be very much a ball winner who makes safe passes to other players. Now, for me personally, when I look at our back line and the players around him, Lenny Yoro is a very good passer and will continue to develop into an even better passer. There's also Onana moving higher up. Onana is expected to move higher up and to build up. Lisandro Martinez is one of the best progressors in football, as is Luke Shaw carrying, and Diogo Dalot is very good here. And then you have Kobbie Mainoo to carry the ball through the midfield and move it as well, as Bruno, if he comes deeper as there too. So for me personally, my opinion, I want someone who's going to play safe passes, and win the ball. That's what I want. And you want someone who's going to play safe passes and win the ball. And Fofana, on the other hand, is a lower volume defender. He still defends a lot, but if you look at his successful defensive actions, they're based on possession, is quite a bit lower. However, he's in the top brackets for progressive carries, progressive passes, progressive distances, shot create. I mean, he is more like almost an attacking 8 than a 6, as far as I can measure him, right? That's how I see him, and that would be my main concern with Fofana, is that he's a player who, if you stick him in here, he's going to be getting up a lot. And when you watch him play, he does that. He gets up a lot. He's a little bit more aggressive. I don't think he's going to shield the back line. He's not going to shield the back line as much as Ugarte would. But we could compare it to Zubimendi as well, right? If we get, the thing that's interesting to me is that Fofana would be good to rotate with Kobbie Mainoo. Because if we could sell Christian Eriksen and we get Fofana, we could rotate him with Kobbie Mainoo. And that would make a lot of sense to me, okay? I understand, Fofana has good traits and all of that too. It depends how you view the midfield, right? And what you want out of your midfielder. To me, if you got Fofana and Ugarte, then you have the best of both worlds, for sure. But as a priority, I would rather get a 6 who's just going to sit and shield and pass the ball around. And then, have Collier play underneath him. Let's look at Zubimendi, and then I'll discuss the problem with each transfer, essentially, because there's a problem with each transfer. Let's stick Zubimendi in here and see if we can get the same numbers to show up. Okay, so I lost some of the data, but if we look at it again, Ugarte, there's certain things I don't really need to include. He adjusted tackles, possession adjusted interceptions, he adjusted recoveries. All right. Okay. Who do I think would be the best partner? I think of the options, I still think it's Ugarte. Because look at this for Zubimendi, right? Very low. He's a good tackler, a good percentage, but a very low number of them. Very low on interceptions, lower passing, higher on progressive passing, higher on the number of progressive passes, but actually lower in percentage. About a similar carrier, more progressive. So you kind of again see Zubimendi as another player who probably a bit more conservative than Fofana, but not really a ground-eating ball winner, right? If you look at just in general, and it's interesting, Ugarte's even, these are not really that important of stats. It's still the kind of the, let me look, do we have passing percentage? Where's passing percentage on here? Yeah, here. So Ugarte, again, a much safer passer. So again, it comes back to what you want in the midfield in this section. And I think that is obviously debatable. People are going to have a lot of different opinions on it as fans, right? Of what you want in this position. I feel like, for me, with how good our back line is in possession, and how good Kobbie Mainoo is in possession, I think Zubimendi is better than Fofana for us because he's safer as a player, a little more positionally secure, a little bit safer with the ball, not as aggressive in kind of moving forward. I think when you have Fofana, you're going to see him moving really high up a lot. I think with Ugarte, he'll sit and shield and do whatever you ask him to do. I've also watched him, when asked, drop into the back line, into a 3 anytime that he's asked. I don't think he's out of control. So, I mean, in an ideal world, you get Zubimendi and Ugarte, or Fofana and Ugarte. But I feel like we lack Ugarte a little bit more. Either way, I think maybe they're not convinced of any of them. Are any of them a Rodri, where they can be a destroyer and incredible on the ball? That I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody who's that good out there, and that's kind of the problem that you have, in all of this. I don't think there's a player that fits exactly. My concerns with Ugarte is that he's not particularly tall, in terms of, all of that. And he's not really going to pass forward much if we need or want that. But I think he's better than people are giving credit for on certain aspects of his game. So if we're looking at Ugarte and Zubimendi and Fofana, the issues with all of them, is that in terms of buying them is this. Ugarte, United don't want to pay more than 35-40 million for, or ideally a loan with options and obligations. That's what they would like to do if they're going to get an Ugarte. Okay, I don't think that they're convinced of him at all in terms of being for sure the guy, and so there's question marks over him, and they may not pursue a transfer unless they get it as a good opportunity. So that's the concern there. Now, if PSG go and they get João Neves, then I think they'll lower the price on Ugarte. I think they don't want to sell and have a bunch of money before they finish up those kind of talks. So that's going to depend, things are going to depend there. The stories on Rios are not true as far as I know. United have not made any contact and are not looking at signing him at this point in time. The issue with Zubimendi is United have watched him for a long time, but he's 60 million euros release clause, which they're going to ask for. United cannot afford that right now. They don't want to pay that kind of fee right now for a player that they're not 100% sold on, and it's uncertain whether he wants to leave his club at this point in time. In order to get Zubimendi, they would need to raise quite a lot of money from McTominay or Casemiro as a sale. They would like to get a midfielder in anyway, okay? Like, even if they cannot sell anyone, they would like to still figure out getting a midfielder in, because technically we're down a man from Amrabat last season. Now, one of the considerations is if they cannot sell anybody and nobody leaves, do they get, as a fallback option, do they go back for Amrabat? Now, I said last week they had no plans to sign him, and it was confirmed they contacted Fiorentina, told them they wouldn't trigger it. And then you have Collier, who could step into that role where you don't need a signing, and he steps up into that position. And then you have potentially, as I understand it, Fofana, who's looked at, is if he doesn't go to Milan, and if it doesn't get done, that maybe they'll keep it. That they'll keep it in mind. And so you have some different kind of options here overall that they're exploring, among others. But part of the problem, of course, is the money. So I think that in terms of what's more likely at this point in time, if they cannot sell Scott or Casemiro, which is looking fairly unlikely, McTominay, I wouldn't necessarily say unlikely. McTominay is looking at his offers, and he definitely could go. We've seen Ten Hag would like to keep him. There's definitely a chance we could keep him. But based on his role and his discussions with the club, he may ask to leave. And then if a good offer comes in, they will let him go for 30 to 40 million. Now, if that happens and they get pure profit, all bets are off, because it's going to open up a bigger market of what they can do in the midfield. Casemiro, if he were to go, it would do the same, but there's very little options for him at this point in time. So at this point, what I would say is most likely is either Ugarte comes down in price, or they look at kind of some fallback options. If Ugarte doesn't come down in price, then they look at some fallback options. But Fofana might be gone to AC Milan by that time, and then we would have to consider potentially, what other choices are there. Xavi Simons is not really an option right now. Rabiot, there's been some basic contact just to understand his situation, but I don't think that there's much in that at this point in time, in terms of anything happening. Maybe as an extreme fallback, but I don't think he really solves that problem. Amrabat, again, I'll go back to the situation of, Rabiot unlikely, and I said the same last week. On Amrabat, I think the situation is they don't really want him. and you can't really do another loan. They don't want to, but maybe as like an emergency kind of fallback or something like that. There would be an option there. I would still rate that one as pretty unlikely at this point. So the most likely scenario I see is Ugarte's price comes down and they get him. I understand not everybody is excited about him. And yeah, there's obviously been talk about not unanimity on buying him. And I think some of that comes down to, the price and the consideration. But I think if they could get a loan, then it will happen. If they can get a good price, then it will happen. Because some of that will be just related to the fees and stuff associated with it. So we'll see there. But right now, unless, with McTominay, they can get a sale of him and he asks to leave, I don't expect us to be able to spend anything major in the midfield. Now, if Sancho went to PSG and we got money for him, then it would be a lot more possible to make a move there. However, when you look at the potential of a Sancho to PSG deal, I don't think they're going to offer cash up front, like a deal up front. I could see a situation where it's a loan, we agree a deal where Sancho goes on a loan with an option and we get a loan with an option on Ugarte. You know what I mean? I could see some deal like that being worked out with PSG. Because I doubt that they're going to throw 40 million at him just up front after, everything that's gone on, should they be interested. But there is a lot up in the air. There is a lot up in the air simply because, they've gotten through their major plans. Martial left. They needed a striker. They got Xerxes. Top target, unmissable talent. At center back, they had Varane leave and they replaced him with Lenny Yoro, which is a hell of a replacement. Again, a top target. Now it is a bit of a tangle and a mess because it's all about players departing, money, things like that. Without getting more sales or departures, then they will need to, at best, get some sort of emergency or loan deal. Jadon Sancho would be happy to stay at this point in time. He'd be fine staying and playing at this point in time. There's no issue there. So yeah, it's a bit of a tangle in that side of it. Next thing I want to discuss is a little bit of a change in the way that we're addressing things. When we go back to, Rangers and beforehand, there was obviously, a number of players who didn't go due to, little small fitness things, including like Marcus Rashford, including others. I'll talk about that Tony and striker stuff in a minute. That I don't understand at all, frankly. Now, if Sancho left, sure, you could say that you might be a little bit short in the forward line, especially if in the consideration that Antony is not majorly in the team, but I'll get to that in a second. One of the things I talked about, originally back in January, and I want to be kind of not careful, but smart about how I'm phrasing this because I don't want to put it the wrong way or try to throw a bunch of people under the bus or anything like that. But yeah, don't expect too much else. It's really dependent, if you remember when we spoke with Rob Dawson as well, one of the points that he made that I thought was correct and really does align with everything we've heard is that they don't want to make mistakes this year. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to be spending money on players that they're not sold on. And I think in a large respect, when you're looking at this as a 3 to 5 year plan, you'd rather get players you're sure of and develop them than sign players that you're going to be looking to sell in 1 to 2 years, right? So with Lenny Yoro, he is going to be a player for the next 5 to 10 years. With Joshua Zirkzee, he's going to be a player for the next 5 years. These are players that can develop into your top players, and that you're definitely, you're definitely keeping, that are not making, mistakes on. And I don't think they're going to spend money for money's sake. They'd rather be a little bit short in certain areas than overspend. Because it's not a 1-year plan. It's a 3 to 5 year plan to build United back. And that is important. And that is an important consideration. But what I wanted to mention is one of the things that we discussed back in January was obviously that there was a departure of a physio from United. Now, we know that this summer as well, multiple other physios have left. And that Gary O'Driscoll has kind of taken over completely, revising and overhauling the whole area at Ineos' behest and with their blessing, and alongside Sir Dave, who, this is again an area of his expertise. There is, as I understand it, one of the major concerns that happened last year is the reason our injuries were so bad is that when players would get injured or they'd have little injuries, especially earlier on, or they'd be at risk or they'd be recovering from injury, essentially we would just play them, and they would return, they would be cleared, and they would play, and then they would get re-injured. And it happened over and over and over again. And there was concern specifically from players like Mason Mount and others over how their rehabilitation was being handled, to the point where they were kind of talking to their own people instead of the club about how to deal with their own health. This has been a problem for a long time too, but they were completely not trusting the way that the club was dealing with their rehabilitation and their recovery from injuries. And I believe that, as I can kind of gather, there's a little bit of a different, there's a little bit of a different, it has been happening for a long time. And there's going to be a bit of a different way of doing things, kind of moving forward. It's not that players won't sometimes play through a little bit of pain or push through certain barriers, because it happens. However, when they're out with injuries or there's risks, it's going to be measured a bit differently. They're all going to be much more individually assessed in terms of their thresholds of where they can play, where they cannot, things like that. And so they've all been replaced. And so you can see, like, Marcus Rashford didn't train for a couple days and play. Now he's back in training. Well, why? Minor thing. But they wanted to be absolutely certain, in basic individual fitness and rest on a different program than usual, rather than just kind of continuing to train and see if he can make the team. And yeah, it's preseason, but I expect we'll see that in the regular season as well. Prevent the need for anything worse to happen. And it's the same with others. They want to make sure they're totally fit. We're taking extra time with Maguire, extra time with Lindelof, extra time with a lot of these players to make sure that they're at a lower risk level. The other thing that has changed, little things, tons of little things, tons of little things, like down to the fact we've heard before where they wanted to separate out people from, the staff a little bit more, so that they were not necessarily like all involved. And there's stuff down to the food, where one of the reasons they wanted to make a change where players, like, in their eating areas were separate from the staff, is that they literally are like individual diets for players, with chefs and cooks being brought in to cook specific individualized planned diets rather than just a menu. And so that's obviously something specifically for the players. It's not for everybody. So that's one of the reasons that they've done that. These are all the things, when you kind of joke about marginal gains and Dave Brailsford aspect of it, that actually really matter, because they're all the little things where they look at individual assessments of health and fitness and say, what is the ideal way to get them as healthy and as fit as possible? And yeah, it's the little things, but helping them in better ways to control their weight and control their protein. And there's so many, it's such an advanced kind of science, where United used to be at the best at everything. And now they're not. And now they're trying to be again. And these are areas that they're making a big focus. And so, you know, obviously, like, you don't want to make a huge deal about it because it's like, yes, eating the right diet isn't probably going to make it so, you know, Eriksson doesn't practically break his ankle to a nasty tackle. But it's a lot of little things together that minimize the risks that are being taken. And there is a lot more oversight from the doctor who's going to, you know, Gary O'Driscoll, who's going to be much more firm in, you know, when players are ready, when they're not, things like that, and with everything. So it's a different kind of approach, and I think something that's going to make a big difference overall, you know, in the short and the long term, where on average, we're just going to see less and less and less issues. So yeah, it's just something I wanted to talk about because I think that, you know, it matters. Moving on to center backs. Let's come back and pull this up again. Moving on to center backs and discussing it. You know, one of the things that we obviously need to understand and kind of look at overall is, let me get this just how I wanted to put it. One of the things I wanted to look at overall here is obviously we've been prioritizing a second center back and getting 2 center backs in. Now we can kind of see why when we look here. We've got behind Lisandro Martinez, we have Victor Lindelof, but we also of course have Lenny Yoro, Johnny Evans, who can play here too, and who can pass with kind of the left-footed angles and all of that. And you know, they want a second one. They would still prefer to get Braithwaite, and they were still considering it. But the problem is they've regularly been told that now in recent times from Everton, and I understand them to be pretty firm on this, that they just don't want to drop their price at all anymore. That they just really have no interest in lowering, you know, the price that they've been looking at for him on that 70 million. And United just obviously don't rate him at that level. You know what I mean? Like, there's a matter of whether or not, you know, there's a matter of yeah. There's just a matter of whether or not they think he's worth that. Even if he's a top player, like, even if he was sort of a top target, there's still going to be a limit to the ceiling of what they can spend. And the issue is that without major sales, there's just not going to be the money to do that. Victor Lindelof isn't going to make it so they can spend 70 million pounds on Braithwaite. And potentially, you know, then the other option we obviously know is Matthijs de Ligt. The issue with de Ligt now, and this was always the issue, you know, in combination between him and Lenny Yoro, is that both of them are going to want to be that first player in the team. Both of them are going to be part of the discussion would have been about getting serious minutes at United. And as David Ornstein said, you know, de Ligt was somebody initially brought up by Ten Hag that the club were on board with. They've watched him for a long time. But Lenny Yoro was full on the main top target in the plan. So it leaves it in a bit of an awkward situation because do you want to sign a player who is on significant wages, who is also young and who would want to be in that first team position? It makes it a little bit more challenging. Braithwaite would be more willing to be, first of all, proper depth on both sides. So these are kind of the challenges that you deal with. You know, Yoro, they're going to want Yoro to play as much as possible. And that's going to be part of the challenge, no doubt about that, with de Ligt. The other issue was that de Ligt becoming a viable choice was always about getting him at an opportunity price, okay? This is just an important aspect. For him to be viable, he needed to be not pursued at all costs, but at an opportunity price. 50 million euros plus add-ons is not what they view as an opportunity price for a player who's also going to be on significant wages that isn't totally at the top of their needs and wants. So if they can get him at a lower price, then great. Otherwise, they're not going to. And, you know, I frankly wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make a purchase in this area. There are other options then that they might look at. You know, yes, the links to Trevor Chalobah are correct. They have liked Chalobah. They have looked at him as an option, and especially as a backup option. They originally would have liked to sign Tosin as a second center back and gotten a free and then spent big on one, and that would have helped them cover a lot of ground. Chalobah could be certainly an option. He certainly could. The issue with, you know, Ignacio, the issue is with some of these other players is, of course, as well, the price. And so they want to keep their options open here. And they also will need offers to come in, either good offers for Maguire or Lindelof. But they're more specifically prioritizing sales of, you know, players like, for example, you know, specifically, they're more prioritizing a sale of Victor Lindelof than they are prioritizing a sale of Harry Maguire, because Lindelof will be out of contract in a year. You know, in how I just described De Ligt, you know, Ugarte falls in a similar bracket, just going back to the midfield. That he needs to be an opportunity price, albeit he is a player in a position of need more. So we will see there. It definitely is a little bit complicated. With De Ligt, it would have to come way down on a fee. But overall, they need sales. And we can kind of see where and why they would need sales. If we can move a center back, we get another center back in. If we can move one of these two midfielders in McTominay or Casemiro, then we can definitely spend on another midfielder. If we can move Wan-Bissaka, and that's the next one to talk about, is you know, is Mazroui, is to sign him. The interest in him is genuine at this point in time. And this is a very, very much an active situation on the fullbacks side of things. We know that West Ham made contact over Wan-Bissaka and are very interested in him. If they get him, United would be looking and interested in signing Mazroui into that's how I'll say it. I'm just going to say it that way. It's easier for me. Into the team. They would definitely be interested in bringing him in. He can and has covered left back as well. Mazroui, sure, that's fine. He has and can cover on the left side as well. Yes, he's injury prone. Yes, he's had a lot of injuries. But at 15 million, you could use him as Mazroui, there we go. You could definitely use him as a depth player. And he can play on both sides. So similar to Kadioglu, who can definitely play on both sides, and of course who I would prefer as well, it would be a decent signing. I'm for it. He's a good player. He's actually quite a quality player. He's familiar with the manager. He could play on both sides, you know, and I think that would give us options. And again, for the price, it's a depth signing. You know, they're not looking to upgrade on Diogo Dalot. They're not looking to upgrade on Luke Shaw. So I'm okay with it. You know, I've been not the biggest, but a big complainer of, you know, talking about of situations with how would I put it? Like buying former Ten Hag players and things like that. But he is a good player. He just is. He's a good player. And I think we could get him on a good fee. And I think that would give us a lot of flexibility there, you know, just to simply do it. So we are looking at him. He is definitely of interest, is Mazroui. And if we can get him, then that would kind of almost force West Ham to look at and kind of move forward with Wan-Bissaka. So that is something to bear in mind, and I think that is something that has serious potential to happen. We need sales. We need movement of other players to get more purchases in, and this is a real option that has grown. He is definitely a genuine option there. And I think that that would be okay. I understand people talking about the injuries, things like that. I get it. Look, he's only missed 6 more games than De Ligt, and people didn't seem to have a problem with that. If he's a depth fullback signing where Diogo Dalot is an incredibly healthy player who can play almost every game, you know, and we have more rotations for Shaw, that's fine. We don't need him to play more than 15 to 20 games. I'm okay with it. I really don't mind it. I'm not too big on that. I also think that, you know, potentially it's something that we could see better. So he is an option. That is an ongoing thing. And I think that that would potentially be the most, yeah. I mean, I think this is potentially the closest situation to being resolved, is this one, you know, and potentially later on, you know, because I'm spelling it wrong, right? Yeah. Why is there 2? How funny. You know, potentially later on, Malacia could be healthy. Potentially later on, you know, you could work in one of the youth players. You could play one of the center backs. If you sign like a Chalaba, he can cover at the right side too. But I think people are too quick to label, when you're talking about depth signings, just saying someone's injury prone, I don't think is, you know, I think it's a decent signing. I think it's a decent opportunity type signing. And it just depends. We don't know why the player's been injured a lot. But he is very affordable. And the problem with Frimpong and Vanderson is the same as we've discussed before. They're not looking to upgrade on Diogo Dalot. You go and spend 40, 50 million on those players, it doesn't do much for you. And they also don't necessarily fix the issue. I would take it as a depth signing, as a cheap, affordable depth signing, and you can make another fullback signing next year. You really can. Yeah, Malacia could be healthy, is very doubtful. But, you know, you can make another fullback signing next year. Wan-Bissaka missed more games than Mazroui. Well, interesting on that perspective. You know, it's fine, but it's an option. And it's an option that just gives us another option. And I'm okay with that, okay? I am okay with that. I really am. It's not a big deal to me. So I'm good there. What else? There's 2 kind of final points that I definitely want to discuss. Number 1 is Kyle Walker-Peters is someone that West Ham wanted. When I mentioned before that they had a priority target and then they move on to Wan-Bissaka, then that was Kyle Walker-Peters. And they're interested in him and they're interested in Wan-Bissaka. If they can't get a deal for Walker-Peters, then they'd like to get Wan-Bissaka. They're kind of focused on both. But it might, you know, there's a situation where we might give them a better deal on Wan-Bissaka if we can get Mazroui. So I think it's fine. I'm not so worried about this position. I'm really not so worried about this position. If Wan-Bissaka wasn't in a final year of his contract, we probably wouldn't make a signing here at all. That's just the reality of it. It's not a priority. It's not a priority and it's not a big deal. So, okay. Moving on from that. We've obviously, when we look at this, we've got a lot of forwards here. I meant to put Sancho behind. Right now, we have a lot of forwards, and that's not even considering Antony. Now, the situation with Antony is obviously kind of complex here. We would let him go. That is just a fact. The Ineos, new leadership, United, they would let him go. The issue is that the issue with Wan-Bissaka is not him being underrated, it's that he wants to leave. He would prefer to go back to London. He's only got a year left. And it'd be better to get some value. But the issue with Antony is that we want to let him go, but he's on big wages and nobody seems particularly interested in him, and he doesn't really want to leave. Now, there's really obvious reasons why he wouldn't want to leave. And so you get a little bit of a conflict there. But he's just well down the pecking order. Amad Diallo, I said this a few months ago that they were looking at potentially a new contract for him. This was still during the season, I think, towards the end of it. And it's been confirmed now on a number of occasions, and I know this to be correct. He is a player who has been told that he is an important part of the team moving forward, and they will likely discuss a new contract at the end of summer. So that gives you undoubtedly Xerxes, Højlund, Garnacho, Ahmad, and Rashford, and then potentially still Sancho if he stays. That's a lot of forwards, and there's not really a place for Antony. So I think they'll continue to look at solutions for him. I think he won't play much, and then, may look to see if there's anywhere he can go later on. But these are the priority forwards at this point in time. And, it is what it is. Those are the ones we can expect to play more than anybody else. And I think those are the ones that we will expect to do the best. So, yeah, ask one more time if he'll consider a move to left back. Let's do something really quick. Just on this. I'm quite curious. When Mazroui played compared to Dalot, I just want to see their stats if it'll work. Just got to reload. Give it a sec here. There we go. Okay. Just stylistically, look at this. Tackles attempted and tackle percentage, they were virtually identical. More interceptions, more progressive actions, more crosses from Dalot, better crosses from Dalot, same shot creating actions. Pretty similar players. Key passes, shots. Mazroui has more touches, so of course he's going to have more involvement in some of these things like XG, chain, and all of that kind of stuff. But pretty interesting. Pretty interesting players. I think it makes sense. I think they could be similar players, and obviously he knows Ten Hag quite well. Let's compare him to Wan-Bissaka. Yeah, I mean, when you look at all the positive stats, Wan-Bissaka a little bit better defensively, but otherwise, obviously, not unexpected. I know Bayern do dominate, so you can't just look at it on a purely stats basis, but I'm just saying he's obviously a more competent offensive fullback. It's just a reality, who will match more what Diogo Dalot brings to the table, in my opinion. And so it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. Okay, and then let's see, what else did I have? I had a couple of things. So, what else could we do in the window? Maybe we move Victor Lindelof on. I know that Chalobah isn't necessarily here. What I would actually say happens is if Chalobah were to be signed, I'm just giving us a realistic name here, then we could put Maguire. Maguire would be a little bit more of a left and Chalobah on the right. Wan-Bissaka out for Mazroui in over there. And then in the midfield, let's just say the most likely right now might be Ugarte, Casemiro. This might be Scott in there. There might be Collier in there. And that might be the most likely way that we approach the season in terms of overall moves at this point in time. I don't really know on Chalobah if that's likely. This is more likely right now. This is still, I think, a little more likely as an option if that price comes down. So we'll see. But maybe it's somebody else here, but we will see. So that's where that is. Now let's see. What else did I want to say? United are not looking at this point in time. There's a sort of a final point. United are not looking at this point in time to sell any of their most important players. They don't want to sell Bruno Fernandes now. They don't want to sell Marcus Rashford now. They're not looking to sell any of these players, really, at this point in time. Now, Bruno Fernandes' situation has developed a little bit. As I understand it, he's still due to have talks with United. He is still due to... He's still got options out there that are potentially looking at it. His agent is still looking at his future. However, United don't want to sell. If he was to come in and bring a big offer, then they would consider it if he wanted to go. But right now, United, as I gather, want to give him a new deal at the end of summer. And it's something that they're going to open up discussions for. They would like to give Bruno Fernandes a new contract at the end of summer. Now, I don't think it's going to be like a 5-year deal. But right now, his contract expires in 2026 with the option of a +1. And that would mean that next summer, they'd have to look at selling him because they don't want to let players get into the final years of their deals and have to trigger it and then sell them, and they lose a lot of options. So as I understand it, they would like to, at the end of summer, give him a new contract that potentially adds another year on it so that next season they're not under pressure to sell him. As it's not something they necessarily want to approach yet. But then their options in 2026 are a bit better because they have a 1 year with a +1 and they can still get good value at that time. So that is the current situation with Bruno Fernandes as I gather it. Now, if he is still looking to move, if he wants to go, if he brings a big deal, he could still go, but they don't want to. And their priority right now would be to keep him and move and extend his contract a little bit further. Just because it's a problem that they don't want to solve yet. They think he still can be an important part of the team and can contribute to how we're playing moving forward. And I do have to say, if you're playing this way, kind of like we did with Martial, this is something that Ten Hag has done a lot in the past at Ajax and certain iterations of his team. I think Bruno Fernandes will be much better and is not, I have concerns about Bruno Fernandes' fit and some of the things he brings to the table and all of that, where can we progress into a top team because of just certain traits he has. But a lot of that is about us playing, this very fast counterattacking transitional play. But this kind of way where he gets beyond the striker who drops in like we did with Martial is also something that Ten Hag did a lot at Ajax and certain iterations of his team. And in addition to that, it's also something that fits the way we played a bit more at the end of the season. We didn't really have a striker to do it. So Bruno was playing striker and McTominay was here and they were kind of forming a partnership up there. And so I think we see this balance a little bit more. Now, if we're playing with Rasmus Højlund and, Ahmad is out wide, we can see kind of the same thing where, they're just moving a bit differently in terms of how the team gets set up. So I think that there is a good fit for Bruno to play better with the type of team that we're building, overall. And so there's a lot. I think that a lot of these players like Bruno and Rashford are just rated more. And I think that in a 3 to 5 year deal, their output that they can bring to the table with how we're building things matches, fits, and is something that we can still progress with and do well moving forward. And then it gives them a couple of years to then say after that, okay, can we move past Bruno at that time? Or where are we? So that is the situation with Bruno as of now, and they do want to keep him and continue moving forward. So yeah, I think for the most part that covers the majority of what I wanted to kind of get into today. I don't really understand the thing with Ivan Toney and the strikers and all of that. It sort of doesn't really add up to me. If we were to sell Sancho with Antony being viewed as excess to what we have, then yeah, technically I guess we still could be a little bit short but we'd have 5 solid forwards. I can't see the money being spent there. We still need a midfielder. Facundo Pellistri is still likely to leave. Hannibal's likely to leave. The same names. Nothing's really changed on those fronts. So right now, the reason it's a little bit unclear is because after we've completed our original plan of striker, center back, now it's exploring options. So we're contacting lots of midfielders, assessing the situation, contacting more players in the fullbacks, assessing the situation, and continuing to keep our options open. so that if we can sell and raise funds, or if prices come down, then we'll have more options. So the first thing I do expect that's coming to a bit more of a head would be this Wan-Bissaka Mazroui. God, I can't get it right. It doesn't matter. Mazroui situation that we'll have to address and see if that becomes feasible. Because really a lot of it's going to depend on West Ham. If they don't buy Wan-Bissaka, it makes it a lot less likely for us to sell him. If they manage to get, you know, him instead of Wan-Bissaka, then obviously we can't get him. So there's a lot up in the air right now in that respect, and that's why it's unclear. But I think what's important with Ineos and with the new leadership is that they want to keep their options open, and they don't want to make mistakes. It's not about being ruthless with selling players. It's about wages. You can't just dump players because you want to at a financial loss. You have to have genuine buyers for players. And a lot of them are on big wages, and it'll be easier to let players go once they're not on big wages. And once the wage structure is addressed more. But it's also a matter of, if you keep buying failed players, you have a hard time dumping them. Nobody dumps players. City are still stuck with Calvin Phillips, aren't they? He's been a failure. They're still stuck with him. How do they dump everybody? Arsenal had a lot of older players running down on their deals, and it took them a long time. It's not that easy to dump players, and they weren't on the wages that United were on either. If you look at Arsenal's wage bill, it was significantly lower than United's. So, yeah, there's a lot to do there. There's a lot to have happen. But I think that the focus overall is get some good, right players in, and then focus on that. And we have the three, Lindelof, Wan-Bissaka, that are running out. If we sell them and we can replace them, great. If not, they're gone next summer, and we're buying players to replace them anyway. And just do things right. Don't buy deadwood. Don't buy more players that we're going to have to replace in the future. Overall, I'm pretty optimistic. I like the way that we're setting up. I like the way that we're lining up. I think that the way we're aiming to play, is more in line with what suits our team better. And I think that, we are really set up to get the most out of the key players that we have, as well as add good young players to it. Okay. That's it for today. That's all I want to talk about. That's everything I wanted to share. So it's obviously major decisions will be made, and then you would see United probably move forward on other deals. But I would expect the fullback situation to be the next constant thing to address. We will lower the price on Wan-Bissaka to get him to go, if we can get a replacement in. But it's also about being able to afford those replacements, and not just selling a player at a loss, because that doesn't help us buy someone just because we want to get them out. We've got to make smart decisions there too. So any other questions anybody has for me before I end this today that I haven't answered yet? Once again, thank you to everybody for being here, for watching, to the members for joining, for all of it. I appreciate you all. Definitely, if you're here, click like on the video, get the algorithm going. We got over 20,000 subscribers recently, which was awesome, and it's been growing, and it's really appreciated. And certainly, it's just really appreciated. Pafundi could be something for the future. It's not going to be something for now. The other name that should be mentioned, that I did want to mention really briefly, that I understand to be correct, is that Nippon from Norway, that there is a genuine interest in him. Yeah, and that could be one for the future, but not for now. It's not going to be something imminent, but one for potentially the future to keep an eye on for sure. Yeah, that's it. I think that'll deal with everything. Thank you all very much. He was impressive, though. He was impressive. Again, we'll be doing videos and lives through the week. And then on Saturday, I will be in Los Angeles, and I hope to see some of you there. I hope to see some of you there for sure. Obi Martin, I think he will join. I think he will join. There's a lot of good indications that he will join, and I think that would be awesome too. And that's another thing. We don't need more strikers. If we can signing players like Obi Martin to come in, he's going to be somebody who wants to step up into the senior team in the next year or two. We don't need a lot more strikers. We really don't. I just, it's kind of an odd one to me. Very much an oddball. So let's see what happens moving forward. Sales, everything else. But otherwise, I hope to see you all soon. And I hope to see some of you in Los Angeles. And enjoy the rest of your week. And I'm sure I will see you in videos and lives and things like that tomorrow and the next day. I'm going to be doing a podcast with another channel tomorrow morning, my time, afternoon, your all time. So look out for that. I will tweet that out as well as my own videos. Okay. Thank you all, and see you all later. Enjoy.